This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello and welcome to 6 Minute English. I'm Neil.
And I'm Dan.
Now then, Dan, do you ever feel awkward?
Awkward?
Yes, feeling uncomfortable, embarrassed or self-conscious in a social situation where something isn't quite right.
Sometimes. I remember always feeling very awkward watching TV with my parents if there was an explicit love scene. You know, people canoodling.
Ooh, yes, me too. And that feeling of awkwardness is what we're looking at in today's 6 Minute English and how it's all connected to social rules.
Social rules are the unspoken rules which we follow in everyday life. The way we interact with other people, and particularly with strangers.
Yes, for example, if you're waiting at a bus stop, it's okay to talk about the weather to a stranger.
But it would be very awkward if you broke that social rule by asking them about, I don't know, how much money they earned.
Ooh, yes, that would be wrong, wouldn't it? And we'll find out about another awkward situation on the Underground Railway later in the programme. Before that, though, a quiz. Which city has the oldest Underground Railway? Is it A, London, B, New York, or C, Tokyo?
Aha, well, I'm pretty confident about this. I think it's London.
Well, I'll have the answer later in the programme. Dr. Raj Persaud is a psychologist. He was a guest on the BBC radio programme Seriously. He was talking about social rules. How does he say they affect our lives?
How do we understand what the implicit social rules are that govern our behaviour? They're so implicit, they're so almost invisible, yet we all obey them, i.e. they're massively powerful. But the only way to get at them, because you couldn't use an MRI brain scanner or a microscope, what's the tool you would use to illuminate the social rules that actually govern our lives?
How do they affect our lives?
He says that they govern our behaviour. They govern our lives. This means that they control our lives. They rule our lives.
What's interesting is that he says these social rules are implicit. They're not written down anywhere. They are unspoken, but understood.
If they're unspoken and not written down, how can scientists and sociologists study them? How can they find out about them? They need a way to illuminate the rules. This means a way of shining a metaphorical light on them to see what they are.
Here's Dr. Persaud again.
How do we understand what the implicit social rules are that govern our behaviour? They're so implicit, they're so almost invisible, yet we all obey them, i.e. they're massively powerful. But the only way to get at them, because you couldn't use an MRI brain scanner or a microscope, what's the tool you would use to illuminate the social rules that actually govern our lives?
One way to find out about a rule is to break it. Another word for break when we're talking about rules is breach, and breaching experiments we use to learn about social rules. Here's Dr. Persaud describing one of those experiments.
You breached the social rule on purpose. So a classic one, people would go into the metro, the Underground Railway tube, and there'd be only one person sitting in a carriage. You would go and sit next to that person. And if that led to awkwardness or discomfort where the person got off the tube stop immediately, you had discovered a social rule.
So what was the experiment?
Well, quite simply, find a nearly empty train carriage and then go and sit right next to someone rather than a distance away. If that person then feels uncomfortable or awkward, and that's something you can tell by watching their behaviour, for example, do they change seat, move carriage, or get off the train completely? If they do, then you know you've discovered a rule.
So you find a rule by breaking it or breaching it. OK, time to review our vocabulary, but first let's have the answer to the quiz question. I asked which city has the oldest underground railway. Is it A, London, B, New York, and C, Tokyo? Dan, you were pretty confident.
I was. I said London, but now I'm having second thoughts. I think it might be New York.
Ooh, that's a little bit awkward, isn't it? Well, it is London, so I don't know if you're right or wrong. I feel a bit uncomfortable now. The facts are that London opened in 1863, New York was 1904, and Tokyo 1927. Well done, and extra bonus points if you knew any of those dates. Now it's time for our vocabulary. I hope it doesn't make you feel awkward, but can you start, Dan?
Of course. And the adjective awkward and its noun awkwardness are on our list for today. They mean an uncomfortable feeling in a social situation.
This is all connected with the idea of social rules, unspoken but well-known rules which we follow in daily life to avoid awkward situations.
The rules, as Neil said, are not spoken and they're not written down, but we know them and understand them. They are implicit.
And these implicit rules govern our lives. The verb govern means to control and rule.
To see something clearly, either in reality or metaphorically, you need to put some light on it. You need to illuminate it. And that was the next of our words, the verb illuminate.
And finally, we had a word which means, when we're talking about rules, the same as break. To breach.
In experiments, they breached the rules to learn more about them.
Well, we don't want to breach any rules, so it's time for us to leave you for today. But don't worry, we will be back. In the meantime, you can find us in all the usual places online and on social media. Just look for BBC Learning English. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
6 Minute English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello, this is 6 Minute English. I'm Rob.
And I'm Neil.
Now, Neil, are you a tidy person?
Me? Oh dear, no. You should see my wardrobe.
Your wardrobe?
Yes, tidy people keep their clothes in a wardrobe. I just dump a lot of my clothes on the floor. So, a floor-drobe.
Ah, yes. Well, it sounds as if you could use a bit of decluttering. Clutter is the word for general mess and untidiness when you have too many things, too much stuff. These days, the idea of decluttering is very popular.
Ooh, I love a good declutter. Trouble is, I hate throwing things away.
Well, we might have some advice for you in today's programme. But first, a question. It's about cleaning up. The vacuum cleaner is a machine we use to clean our houses. When were the first mechanical floor cleaners, which later became vacuum cleaners, invented? Was it A, the 1860s, B, the 1890s, or C, the 1920s?
Well, you know what? I have no idea. So I'll say the 1890s.
OK, well, I'll have the answer later in the programme. The decluttering techniques of Marie Kondo are very popular these days. A UK decluttering expert, Leslie Spellman, appeared on the BBC radio programme You and Yours to discuss the topic. She was asked to describe the basics of the Marie Kondo method. What's the first thing she recommends people start with?
She basically says you have to do things in a certain order. You have to start with your clothes, then you move on to your books, then you move on to paperwork, then you go on to something called kimono, which is kind of everything else, kitchens, bathrooms, garages, lofts, etc. And then finally you tackle sentimental things.
She says that you have to start with your clothes before moving on through different categories of clutter.
The verb she uses for dealing with these things is to tackle. To tackle something means to deal with it, to sort it out.
And the last things she says you need to tackle are sentimental things. These are things that you have an emotional connection to, such as old letters and photographs. I have to say, those are the things I find most difficult to get rid of. I'm very sentimental like that.
I think you just have to be ruthless, Rob. Either that or buy a bigger house. Right, let's listen to Leslie Spellman again.
She basically says you have to do things in a certain order. You have to start with your clothes, then you move on to your books, then you move on to paperwork, then you go on to something called kimono, which is kind of everything else, kitchens, bathrooms, garages, lofts, etc. And then finally you tackle sentimental things.
So why is it that decluttering is such big business these days? And there are many people and companies offering advice and services. Here's Leslie Spellman again with her thoughts on this.
I think there's been a big shift, really. So my generation, my parents, definitely came from that make, do and mend era post-war in the sort of 20th century. And then all of a sudden people started to get a little bit more money, things became more affordable. You can buy 5 tops for £5 each, and people have done that And that's allowed consumerism to kind of go crazy in the 21st century.
So what does she put our need for decluttering down to?
Well, first she says that there has been a shift in our behaviour. This is a way of saying that there has been a change in the way we behave. We used to make, do and mend much more. This phrase means that we made full use of what we had, and if something broke, we tried to fix it.
And these days we seem to have more money and many goods have got cheaper and we just like buying stuff. Or, as she says, consumerism has gone crazy. Let's listen to her again.
I think there's been a big shift, really. So my generation, my parents, definitely came from that make, do and mend era post-war in the sort of 20th century. And then all of a sudden, people started to get a little bit more money. Things became more affordable. You can buy 5 tops for £5 each, and people have done that. And that's allowed consumerism to kind of go crazy in the 21st century.
Time to tidy up today's vocabulary. But first, let's have the answer to the question. Earlier, I asked you, when were the first mechanical floor cleaners invented? Was it in A, the 1860s, B, the 1890s, or C, the 1920s? And Neil, you said...
I guessed at the 1890s.
Sadly not. The correct answer is the 1860s. So well done to anyone who got that right. Now on with today's vocabulary. The first word we had was floordrobe.
Yes, this is a word to describe a pile of clothes that someone keeps on the floor rather than in a wardrobe.
Well, I don't have a floordrobe, but I do have a chairdrobe. I guess you can work out what that means. Anyway, it seems we both have too much clutter, which is the untidiness caused by having too many things.
And this leads us to the popular pastime of decluttering, which is throwing away things to make our homes neat and tidy.
Clutter in my life is an issue I haven't tackled yet. I haven't tried to fix it or sort it out.
One area that the experts say you need to tackle is sentimental things. These are things which you have an emotional connection to, maybe old letters and photographs, for example.
We then looked at the word shift, which was a way of saying change. There has been a shift or a change in the way we think about things.
Yes, rather than an attitude of make, do and mend, which means an attitude of being content with what you've got and fixing things if they break, we've become part of a consumerist culture where we like to buy more and more stuff.
But we still find it hard to throw things away.
Yes, indeed we do. Well, it's time for us to collect our scripts and declutter the studio. We look forward to your company next time, and until then, you can find us in all the usual places, online and on social media. Just look for BBC Learning English. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
6 Minute English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
6 Minute English.
From BBC Learning English.
Hello and welcome to 6 Minute English. I'm Dan.
Let me just sit down. And I'm Neil.
Neil, are you wearing high heels?
Hang on. Not anymore.
How did they feel?
Oh, agony. How do women do this?
Why on earth are you wearing them?
Well, I wanted to look fashionable and cool. Everyone knows that high heels are the height of fashion on the street, at work and at parties. I'm ready for anything.
I'm not so sure you're right there, Neil. Our topic for this 6 Minute English is about the rise in popularity of the comfy shoe. However, before we step into that, let's have our quiz question. Which famous sports clothing company's first pair of running shoes was inspired by the square pattern on a waffle-making machine? Was it A, Adidas, B, Nike, or C, Puma?
Well, I have no idea, so I'm going to say Adidas, because that's got marks.
We'll have to wait until later to find out. So, what do you think of when I say comfy shoes?
Well, comfy is an adjective, which is an informal way of saying comfortable. So I suppose we're talking trainers. But I was always told that trainers weren't appropriate for everywhere, like work and many formal or social places, such as parties, bars and clubs.
Well, that certainly used to be the case, but that may not be as true anymore. Victoria Moss is the senior fashion editor at the Telegraph newspaper in the UK. Here she is speaking on BBC Radio 4's Woman's Hour about why trainers are considered more fashionable these days. Is it something that's happened very recently?
Well, I think it's been sort of coming on for a while. And I think one thing in fashion in the last 10 years has been a sort of mass casualisation of everything. And there's been a big streetwear trend, which has filtered through, and that's...
So is it something that's happened very recently?
Apparently not, no. She said that there's been a mass casualisation of things over the last 10 years. Casualisation here means the process of becoming less formal and more relaxed. More casual.
Yes. Society has relaxed its idea of what is considered formal or appropriate. In addition, we're told there has been a big streetwear trend. Streetwear is a style of casual clothing worn especially by young people from urban settings. That's the city.
This trend has filtered through. If something filters through, it appears or happens gradually over time.
So, presumably, the trend for streetwear filtered through from its specialised area into mainstream fashion, until everyone was following it.
Well, that explains why trainers are more fashionable these days, but it doesn't explain why people are wearing them more. Not everyone follows fashion, you know.
Yes, Neil, I can see that when I look at you. But you're forgetting the comfy part. Emma Supple is a podiatrist, a foot doctor, who also spoke on Woman's Hour. Here she is explaining why being comfy is so important. What are people doing more these days that they weren't before?
So what we're actually talking about is actually people for wellness, walking more and doing more. And they're not going to do that in a lot of high heels. So trainers are changing the materials. There are now a lot of fabric trainers. And if you've inherited foot problems, then that kind of fabric, they're wrapping around knobbly bits. And knobbly bits hurt.
What are people doing more?
They're walking more, and they're doing it for wellness. Wellness is the state of being healthy.
As a result, trainers have had to change their materials to fabric to make themselves more comfortable.
Not only that, but if you have any foot problems, these fabric or cloth trainers are better at fitting to the shape of your foot. That means if you have any knobbly bits, they won't hurt as much, which makes trainers more comfortable for everyone.
Knobbly is an adjective that means lumpy, having many raised areas on the surface.
So it's the combination of a change in fashion and a change in materials that's made trainers and other comfy shoes more popular than ever, right?
Exactly. And hard on the heels of that revelation, we can reveal the answer to our quiz question. Earlier, I asked which famous sports clothing company's first pair of running shoes was inspired by the square pattern on a waffle-making machine. Was it A, Adidas, B, Nike, or C, Puma? Neil, you said?
I said Adidas.
Sorry, the answer is Nike. In 1971, their co-founder, Bill Bowerman, was having breakfast when he saw the waffle machine, and it inspired the design of Nike's first running shoe. Let's hope it was a comfy one.
Aha! It must be time to review our vocabulary. So first, we had comfy, an adjective which is an informal way of saying comfortable.
Then we had casualization. This describes the process of things, such as fashion or behavior, becoming less formal and more casual.
Next was streetwear. That describes a style of casual clothing that's worn especially by young people who live in cities.
Then we heard filtered through. If something filters through, it appears or happens gradually over time. For example, has it filtered through to you yet, Neil, that high heels were a mistake?
Yes, it has. They didn't do anything for my wellness, I can tell you, which means the state of being healthy.
And lastly, we had knobbly. This adjective means lumpy, or having many raised areas on the surface, like skin when it gets cold. Do you have anything knobbly on your foot, Neil?
Probably. My feet are killing me.
Haha, I think we found your Achilles heel. However, it's time to go, but we will be back. In the meantime, you can find us in all the usual places, online and on social media. Just look for BBC Learning English. Bye for now.
Goodbye.
6 Minute English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
6 Minute English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Hello, this is 6 Minute English. I'm Neil. Joining me is Rob.
Hello.
Rob, when we think of Easter, what do we think of?
Chocolate.
Well, yes, chocolate Easter eggs are an obvious symbol of Easter, but there is an animal people often associate with Easter.
Rabbits. Cute, adorable and fluffy. What's not to like about a rabbit?
Well, not everyone is a fan of them. By not a fan of, I mean they don't like them. Some people think they are a pest. But we'll be telling you more about rabbits shortly.
That's good to know. Well, I'll tell you what I am a fan of, and that is your quiz questions. So what are you going to ask me today?
It's all about wild rabbits. In the last rabbit survey in 1995, how many were estimated to exist in the UK? Was it A, 370,500, B, 3,750,000, or C, 37,500,000?
I know rabbits are everywhere in the UK, but not 37 million of them, so I'll go for B, 3,750,000.
Well, you'll have to wait until the end of the programme to find out. But you're right when you say rabbits are everywhere in the UK. It's probably true in other countries too. You could say they are endemic, meaning very common or strongly established in a place or situation.
But are they a typically British wild animal?
They are now, but it's believed they were brought to the country by invaders. Some say the Romans, others the Normans. But they eventually spread across the UK. Victoria Dickinson is author of a book called Rabbit, and she's been telling the BBC Radio 4 programme, Costing the Earth, about what helped them spread.
It was really by the middle of the 17th century when people really started to think about rabbit as being particularly British. And certainly there were more rabbits in Britain than in the rest of Europe. There was a calculation done that there are over 400 villages and towns in Britain with the word warren in their name. So the rabbits were raised in Britain, but they really kept to their warrens until there was the rise of fox hunting. When their predators disappeared, rabbits do what rabbits do best, and they started to multiply and become wild, feral rabbits throughout the land.
So Victoria knows a thing or two about rabbits and said the word warren, used in town and village names, is evidence that they've been in the UK since the mid-17th century. A warren is the area underground where rabbits live, with lots of holes and connected passages.
But today we use the word warren to mean a building or part of a town where there are lots of confusing passageways or streets. It's a kind of place where you get lost.
But it was rabbit warrens where rabbits would live until hunting, particularly fox hunting, was introduced, and that killed many of the rabbit's predators. A predator is an animal that hunts and kills another animal.
Now, Victoria was talking about feral rabbits, so wild rabbits, not the sort people keep as pets in a rabbit hutch. Moving on, I'm interested to know why not everyone loves these cute little creatures. I mean, think of the rabbit characters in the Beatrix Potter stories.
Well, they weren't always well behaved, and Victoria Dickinson spoke to the Costing the Earth programme about this. What word did she use to describe rabbits having the two opposite sides to their character?
The rabbit is a paradoxical animal. It has a lot of faces, if you will. It's both wild and tame. It's timid, but also has its reputation as trickster rabbit, if you think of Peter Cottontail or you think of Brer Rabbits. And I think our relationship with rabbit is the rabbit of the nursery rhyme, the rabbit of childhood, or you think of Peter Rabbit.
She said that rabbits are paradoxical animals. That's the word that describes them having two opposing characteristics.
Yes, we think of them as wild, maybe a trickster, someone who deceives people to get what they want. Like Peter. What a cheeky rabbit.
But we also think of rabbits as tame. We have nursery rhymes about them. Kids have soft, cuddly rabbit toys. I say that they're the perfect symbol for Easter.
OK, Rob, if you say so. But now let me give the answer to the question I set you earlier. In the last survey of rabbits in 1995, how many were estimated to exist in the UK? Was it A, 370,500, B, 3,750,000, or C, 37,500,000? Rob, what did you say?
I said B, 3,750,000.
Well, you're wrong, Rob. A government survey put the population in the UK at 37.5 million, so a lot more. But despite its reputation, a recent survey suggests rabbit numbers in the UK have declined by around 60% over the last 20 years.
That is sad news. But let's cheer ourselves up with a recap of the vocabulary we've discussed today, starting with a fan of.
When someone is a fan of something, they are keen on it. They like it a lot. If you're not a fan of something, you don't like it.
We mentioned endemic, meaning very common or strongly established in a place or situation.
And we talked about a warren, an underground area where rabbits live, but also a building or a part of a town where there are lots of confusing passageways or streets where it's easy to get lost.
A predator is an animal that hunts and kills another animal.
Paradoxical describes things that have two opposing characteristics, making it hard to understand.
And a trickster is someone who deceives people to get what they want.
Well, I'm no trickster. It really has been 6 minutes, so it's time to call it a day. Please join us next time.
Bye for now.
Goodbye.
6 Minute English.
From the BBC.